I'm here to say go home. And I think some of you know what I mean by that. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Shawl. I was going to say something like, aren't you just so filled with gratitude for what's been going on for the past few days? But I look out and I just see people tired, but full of gratitude. Really. It's been such a beautiful conference. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, there's just a feeling about this conference that's a little deeper, a little different than other years. It's just, for me, it's been a tribute. I love coming to conferences, not to talk, but to be able to listen. I've never gotten tired of listening to people talk about what they see about the three principles. Because there's no end to the depth and expression and the unique expression that each of us has for what we see, what we hear, what we've learned. I think that's the beauty of this. Everybody brings something. And I mean everybody. Each one of us brings something to the table. It's been like a smorgasbord, where there's so many choices. And it's all delicious. And at a certain point, you get really full. And I know you're really full. So hopefully we'll keep this short. I don't like the idea of being a closer. I prefer to think of this as an opener. You know how they say minds are like parachutes? They work better when they're open. Yeah. Going home is falling into an openness where anything is possible. An openness where you can't help but to feel alive and connected to the people around you. That kind of openness. Nothing like that. I want to start with a couple of stories. And they're about a couple of people that I've talked to. But once you realize that when people are talking about the principles, every word out of their mouth is a metaphor trying to point you toward a place within yourself. So even though this is a story about initially a 7-year-old girl, it's become my story, and I think it's our story, and I think it's each of our stories. Because it's rare these days when a client says that they're experiencing anything when I go, yeah, me too. Oh yeah, we have that experience as a human being. Oh yeah, I experienced that. So I get a call from one of my friends, and she said, Dicken, my 7-year-old daughter's school called me and said that they were very, very concerned about my daughter. Because when she's in school, she's so anxious, she can't really participate. She's just a bundle of nerves. And we think maybe she's so quiet, we think maybe she's depressed too. And we recommend that you, as soon as possible, get your daughter into therapy. She goes, Dicken, help. I don't want my daughter to have to go to some place and dredge through her past, or to work on herself. I know what you do, or where you point people. Would you consider talking to my daughter? No hesitation, of course. I said, she lived at quite a distance, so I said, well, I'll talk to her by Skype, but it's going to be the three of us, because I want you there with your daughter, because it can be a little unnerving for someone to confront the likes of me by themselves. Hello there, little girl. I said half an hour. That's plenty. That's plenty. That's for anybody really. That's plenty. So we Skype, and there's my friend, and I'm waiting for her daughter to come in, and then I see a little head peek out from behind her. She's sitting behind her mother. She was so anxious. So I start talking to her mom. And then I, at some point, said, I'm so glad your daughter could join us. What a treat. I love 7-year-olds. It's really, some of my best teachers have been 7. I could tell you stories all day long about the 7-year-old, the wisdom that came out of the mouths of 7-year-olds that impacted me. Right? And then pretty soon, her head's out now. You know, because kids can hear. They can look in a person's eyes, and they can hear a tone of voice, and they can tell whether you're safe or not. So she starts putting her head out a little bit. I say, hi, it's good to see you. What do you like to do? What do you like? I learned more about unicorns. You know, sometimes out of the horn, butterflies fly out of all different colors, and they fly around the world and create magic. And I said, oh, yeah, I know something about those magic butterflies. I happen to call them insights, but... So we had a great chat. About 20 minutes of the session, I talked with her about what brought her joy, and I could see her gradually opening up and relaxing. And then we started talking, her mom brought up about her being anxious in school, and I said, oh, you feel anxious sometimes, like nervous? Oh, I feel that way quite a bit. And I mean it. The principles haven't stopped me from feeling nervous or upset or have reactions to things. And he said, oh, I feel that way. It's really normal. I think that's one of the most beautiful things we can say to young kids. Whatever you're feeling is really normal. There's nothing wrong with any feeling you're having. Feelings are beautiful, all of them, the full spectrum. We may not think so. Right? It's really normal. And I said, can I share with you, and I'm talking to the little girl directly now, she's looking around. I said, can I share with you something that not many adults know, or that it's easy for anybody to forget, even if you do know it? But all of our feelings come from the same place. Deep inside of us, there's a place, this power, and it keeps bringing us thinking, and whatever thought comes into you, you're going to feel. Whatever thought, you can't not feel whatever thought comes into your head. So when thoughts come into your head, it's not wrong or bad, because you're going to feel whatever that is. I could see her relaxing in the face of something that I think is true for everybody. It's not personal. It's not a philosophy. It's something that's true. And in the face of truth, people tend to relax. That it's normal what you're experiencing. You're just experiencing your feeling, just like me, just like your mom. Can't do it wrong. And it's important to know that that's where anything you're feeling comes from, because otherwise you'll think it's coming from out there. We talked a little bit and gave examples. And bye-bye, great talking to you. Maybe we can talk again. Right? The next day, her mom emailed me and said her daughter said, when can we talk with Dicken again? Isn't that interesting? So we set up another time. And 3 days after we had our first talk, I get an email from her mom saying that her daughter came up to her. She said, my daughter came up to me and she said, Mom, inside of me, there's a factory. It's the thought factory. And it makes all of my feelings. I didn't talk to her about a thought factory. That was her gaining her own understanding in her own way with her own metaphor. I have a thought factory inside of me that's making all of my feelings. I read that and I got really touched because I reflected on that, and it's like, it's so true. You can look around and you can see any person and their little thought factory is working 24/7. It's just making up feelings all day long. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have a thought factory. You wouldn't be a human being without that thought factory. I shared that metaphor with some clients who were struggling, and it helped them. It was sort of like this little girl's wisdom was imbued within those words, and it struck a chord as being true for some people, some other adults that I was talking to. We got on the second phone call. She's sitting next to her mother instead of behind. And she says hello to me right away. I said, oh, it's great to see you again. And I said, I couldn't wait to talk to you. I couldn't wait. I heard from your mom that you came up with this idea about all of us have a thought factory inside of us. It's a beautiful thing. What a beautiful metaphor. And that's so true, isn't it? So we talked about it for a while, and then we started talking about unicorns and all kinds of other fun things. She had some great shoes. Talked a lot about her shoes. She's starting to smile. For the first time I heard her laugh. We finished that call. I get another email from Mom saying, I can't believe how different she is. She's enjoying school for the first time. She's more relaxed, more confident. She's looking forward to going to school. See, what began to shift is what shifts for all of us when you know the true source of experience. It no longer is such a frightening world, because it's a frightening world if you think the world out there hurts your feelings, or makes you feel angry, or causes you to be sad. And how normal and natural it is to live at the other end of our thought factory, creating these beautiful feelings, and I think they're all beautiful. We don't have good and bad feelings. We have feelings that allow us to experience life. We talked again a third time. She kicked her mother out of the room. And she said, Dicken, I have one question for you. Who runs the factory? See, we all know. I answered it two ways. I said, well, there's the operational manager who's always there at the factory, who's in charge of the operations. That's you, because you're the thinker. They're your thoughts. And then there's someone who creates the factory and supplies it with everything it needs to be as productive as it is. And because her mom was religious and they were religious, I said, you know who that is, don't you? She goes, yes, God. 7 years old. I said, well, I think we're done. Enjoy your life. I had 3 half-hour calls with about 10 minutes each call, maybe 5-10 minutes talking about the power of thought, the capacity to have feelings and how normal they all are, how beautiful they all are, how we don't need to be frightened by any feeling we have. One of the things I want to talk about that when I heard Sid Banks speak, or when I heard the principles which they transcend, they were here long before Sid Banks, and it's another way of describing life itself. Another way of describing the very, very source of life itself. Has eternally been here. Right? And when I first started hearing these principles, I responded like this little girl and felt that shift. And I love thinking about, I want a bumper sticker that says, shifts happen. It's a 2.0 version of another bumper sticker. Shifts happen. You do this work and you never take for granted when you have the honor and opportunity to sit in front of someone else and watch a shift happen. Because you know what happens? To me, it's the most beautiful thing in the world. I mean, this was something Sid said, is that any human being, for one moment, takes one little step beyond their precious thought system and touches that space inside that's free of limitation, free of judgment, free of concepts, free of beliefs, and touches that space, it must manifest as something beautiful. And on a very practical, down-to-earth level, when people touch that space, that quiet, that silence, as Chip so eloquently stated, that silence, that's the silence from the noise and babble of your thought system. You touch that space, it must manifest as something beautiful. And my experience is, you hear music. You know how they talk about the music of the spheres? You fill up. You get the whoosh. You fill up. You begin to fill up with a beautiful feeling. And your thinking upgrades on its own. You get thinking that's more helpful to you in a very, very particular way for you individually, you personally. It's like a love letter from God just for you. It'll bring you the feeling that's perfect for you, given the situation you're in, given who you are. And it'll bring the thinking that's responsive and helpful for whatever you're dealing with. Whatever you're dealing with, Sid called that space inside that you touch and it manifests as something beautiful, as the ultimate answer. It's where you find everything you're looking for: peace, joy, love, contentment, insight, inspiration, motivation, aspiration, solutions, clarity, perspective, you name it. It's all sitting there, waiting to burst forth into human consciousness. It just takes a little openness. And it loves wisdom, loves openness. When your mind opens, your heart opens, and that feeling, one time Sid said a beautiful thing. He said, there's no word in the English language for that feeling. And I finally got it. It was like, when you're in that feeling, you're not in your conceptual mind. You have access to your conceptual mind. Right? That there's just this feeling of opening, expansiveness. And it embraces everything. It's an unconditional love. You can feel, as I have many times, very upset and fall into that space, and the upset goes from contracting to expanding. And I'm still, in a sense, feeling upset, but it's expanding, so I'm okay with it. It's a feeling without judgment. It's a feeling without any kind of label. I shouldn't have this. It's not the right feeling. It's not a good feeling. And it embraces everything. And when you learn to embrace every feeling that you have, you can be with other people and embrace every feeling they have. Isn't that interesting? My son called me up and he said, Dad, would you talk to his new wife, Autumn? She has to fly to a reunion, and she is so terrified of flying. Later on, I found out that that meant that when she got on the plane, she would crawl up into a fetal position and cry the whole flight. She was so frightened. So I talked with Autumn just before she went on her trip. And you don't just walk up to anybody and go, oh, you know what the problem is? It's just thought. You know, it's whatever you're feeling. Oh, fear of flying, it's just thought. No, you just listen. And as I listened to Autumn talk, what occurred to me, now this is how it works, this is wisdom in action. What occurred to me is, I said, Autumn, you grew up backpacking with your parents in the mountains. And you would go on long backpacking trips, wouldn't you? She go, yeah. And you love that? She says, yes. And I'll bet during your backpacking trips, you ran into some pretty gnarly weather in the mountains. Oh, we did. Oh, sometimes the weather would be so bad. You learned how to deal with weather, didn't you? She says, oh yeah, I know how to deal with any weather. I said, we're part of nature. You love nature. We're part of nature. And part of our nature as human beings is to have weather. You're no different than anybody else. We all have weather. Sun, rain, clouds, storms. You're just experiencing weather. It's a metaphor, right? It's trying to point her toward, we are living in a thought-created experience that brings all kinds of weather to us metaphorically. And it's not like rain is good or bad and sun is good. It's all part of the system. And we talked about that. And she absolutely loved thinking that her absolute paralyzing anxiety was just a normal weather system and part of nature, and that she was part of something greater. The next day, it was just before they got married, and the next day my wife and I and Autumn are walking down the street, and I felt this just compulsion to go into a store, and I said, you guys go ahead, I'll catch up to you. And I walked in, and it's like a gift shop, and I don't know why, and I'm walking around, and then I see a rack of cards, and I walk over and pull out the first one, and it shows a little kid has built a ramp and is now had come off the ramp in a wooden like car that had wings on it, and is sitting there with a hat and goggles on and the cape flying out back, and you can see this kid is like 20 feet in the air, you know, and it says, "Life is an adventure, embrace it." I said, okay, great. Now I know I had to come in this store. And I wrote in this card some things to Autumn, my own little love letter, because I think the world of her. And I sealed it and wrote on the outside, "Do not open until you're on the plane." And I gave it to her just before she left on her trip. And I flew off to California to do something with Michael Neal, and I'm in the hotel room there, and at 5:30 in the morning I hear my phone ding. And when I got up later, I looked, and it was a message from Autumn. It was a picture. She took a selfie, and she's sitting on the plane in her seat, holding the card up with this big smile on her face. At 7 o'clock, the phone rang, and it was Autumn. She said, "Dicken, I just got off the plane, and I'm standing here jumping up and down for joy." She said, "I was fine the whole flight. And there were some times I started to feel anxious, and I just went, oh yeah, just another thought storm. Part of nature. That happens." She lost her fear of her fear. Isn't that interesting? One time Sid said, if the only thing human beings learn is not to be frightened of their own experience, that alone would change the world. The shift happened. And when you shift, you jump to a level of understanding that is always filled with more love and more understanding. More of a sense of connection to life, so that as the little 7-year-old heard something deeper, she shifted to a level where her misunderstanding and anxiety and thinking began to soften, and she began to be automatically more connected. So she went from being behind her mother to beside her mother to standing alone. From insecure to more confident to more engaged to more enjoying being engaged in life. Because that's what wisdom does. When it breaks into your life, it throws you into life. It doesn't take you away from life. I used to be concerned if I go within, am I withdrawing from the world? The opposite happens. I want to talk with you about the nature of change, because my idea about how change happens has changed dramatically. I used to think change requires a lot of hard work and effort and practice and all of that. And then I started seeing in myself and people that I worked with, if you hear truth and it resonates within you, a shift happens, and you start to feel more connected to life. And how hopeful. It's like, well, that's the cure for human suffering. Human psychological suffering, that's the cure. A shift in understanding that allows each of us, this is the cool thing, it allows each of us literally to bring more consciousness into the world, to bring more love and understanding into the world. So let's see if we can take that a step further, because I have so many friends and I know so many people who are now, they've experienced shifts and it's helped them immensely. And they look out at the state of the world and they despair. And they say to me, Dicken, what else can we do? I have to do more. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I've got to do more. I've got to figure out what to do. Let me present another way in which, because there's a way of looking at this that's very, very different. And again, I have to say, I was introduced to this notion by Sid Banks. Because he said the only way the world will change is if each of us goes inside and raises our level of consciousness and bring more love and more understanding into the world. And that's the only way the world fundamentally will change. But then one day I heard that on a deeper level. For me, it was a huge insight. It's why I got inspired to give this particular talk. Why I could say confidently, healing the world, right? The insight was very simple. The quieter you get, the more you get familiar with that space, the more you live in that space, the more you sense there are no boundaries to that space, and it truly is infinite. And we're all connected to that. We're all part of that, intimately part of that. We're not just little leaves on a tree, separate and individual. We're connected to the branch of thought and the trunk of consciousness and the roots of mind. And we're all one tree. Elsie came up to me yesterday and said, Dicken, said this morning actually, said, Dicken, I actually feel like everybody at the conference is part of the same family, that we're all one family. And I just want to hug everybody. Just is better than a cuddle. He said, I just want to cuddle everybody. If we're all one, and if we're all part of an infinite, vast sea of energy, and we can't be separated from the whole, and that separation only happens in our thinking, not in truth, not in reality. Here was my insight. Then it's like an ecosystem. It's all one ecosystem. And there's a truth about ecosystems. As one part of the ecosystem gets healthier, the whole system gets healthier. The little 7-year-old girl bringing more connection and love and understanding into the world is not only impacting her and her parents and the other kids at school, but it's having a ripple effect on the other side of the world. And I truly know that to be true now. I really sense that that's true, that each and every one of us can play a part in creating a better world. Before he died, Sid said, the world is in a dangerously low level. And yet, the only way the world is going to change is each of us goes inside touches that space, brings more love and understanding into the world, and that's how the world will change. But he saw it as an ecosystem, right? So that we can each play a part, literally play a part in healing the world. Now, that doesn't mean you don't do anything else. Doesn't mean you don't go to rallies. Doesn't mean you don't make phone calls. It doesn't mean you don't offer something or teach something or share something. But here's how it works. You touch that space, you fill up with good feeling, and it's that love is filled with wisdom, and it knows how to move you. It knows how to move you in the direction of well-being. It knows how to move you in the direction of helping the whole to thrive. And it may move you to just live a very quiet, beautiful life. It may move you to make phone calls. It may move you to move somewhere else. It may move, as many of my friends, it may move you then to create conferences to share this. You never know, and all of it is perfectly guided by this deeper intelligence. So you don't want to feel bad about where you're moving. I like to say I like letting wisdom have her way with me. Yeah, may wisdom have her way with all of you. So I thought I would end on it is appropriate to end this conference with a short quote from Sid Banks. It's become one of my favorites. So what we've got to do is raise the level of conscious state of humanity, even one little bit. And that's beautiful, that even one little bit, because it affects the whole. And it'll get us out of the mess we're in. How hopeful. This is such a message of hope, not individually, but collectively. It'll get us out of the mess we're in because, you see, when you start to raise the level of consciousness, everybody starts to see different. You literally see a different world. And you see through the eyes of love and understanding, it's a different world. It's not the same world, seen differently. It's a different world. They start to see more positive because they are heading toward a knowing that it truly is a spiritual reality. The lower we are, the more we're identified with ego than our true self. You see more expansively, less ego bound. Heading towards a knowing that it truly is a spiritual reality. That's what it is. That's what life is. It's a spiritual reality. Now, go home.